Work-life balance is different for every single person, but it is extremely important for your mental and physical well-being that you find what works best for you.
When you're doing work, be there fully present, mindfully doing the work. And when you are engaging in the life side of things, be there fully present, engaging in the life part of it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Full Circle, the Magic Mindset podcast. I'm Leah Lilly, joined by my co-host Matt Carlberg, and we are so excited to be bringing you the third episode of this podcast. We created this podcast to bridge the gap between psychology and astrology by looking at different topics each week and seeing how they fit into each of our respective lenses. I work on the astrology side of things, and Matt's area of expertise is the psychology side.
And if you're interested in engaging with our community, you can find us at Leah's website, which is leahlilly.com/fullcirclepodcast, or you can follow our social media on Twitter at fullcircle_pod and at Facebook by looking for Full Circle Pod. Past episodes can be found again on Leah's website or on Spotify or iTunes by searching for Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. Today we have an excellent topic that affects every single person listening right now, and that topic is work-life balance. To give a brief introduction, to give us a little bit of context for the rest of the conversation that we're going to have today, the idea of work-life balance is really, what do we do from the 8 to 5 period that we're in the office or on-site at the job or whatever it may be, and how do we balance that with everything else, such as spending time with our kids, our partner, or spending time taking care of ourselves? One interesting caveat that I think sometimes gets lost in the middle of things is that this is really the difference between things that we have to do or need to do and the things that we want to do. So for example, stay-at-home parents might not have the traditional 8 to 5 career, but they still need to balance the time that they spend giving to their children or giving to their household and the time that they take for themselves. So today we're going to take a look at this balance from a psychology perspective and an astrology perspective. And hopefully we can walk away with some tips on how to make sure our individual balance is right for each of us.
So now we get to talk a little bit about what's going on astrologically, what we're seeing this week, and where we are. Right now we're in Virgo season. Virgo season is our season of organization, structure, routine, habits, sort of looking at our lives and understanding where it is we are and where it is we might need a little bit of improvement by putting in the work to be able to get there, to be able to achieve our goal. And we've talked a bit about how Leo season was really getting clear on those truths and those goals and the things that we wanted to accomplish and taking really big action. Now in Virgo season, Virgo kind of says, now that you've had all these really great ideas and you've started the ball rolling, how are you going to continue to put in the work to make sure that whatever you're dreaming of actually comes to fruition? A lot going on in Virgo right now. I'm happy. It's my season. I'm feeling it. The sun's in Virgo, Mercury's in Virgo, Venus is in Virgo, Mars is in Virgo. There's a lot in Virgo right now, which means that we're just being asked to look at a lot of different places to understand where we are in our lives and what it is that we want to get down to work on. We're also seeing the moon in Libra right now. We just had our new moon in Virgo, and that was on Friday. There's just a lot of Virgo energy going on right now. A lot of structure being called in and finding a structure that works for you, finding routines and habits that serve you and make you feel like the best version of yourself, make you feel healthy. And treat you well, right? Treating your body well, treating your mind well, treating your heart well. Because it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to like eat well and set myself up on that routine. But it's another thing to say, I'm going to eat well to nourish my body and do it as an act of love rather than an act of, oh, I've got to put all these boundaries on it and make sure that I hit this goal weight and look a certain way, which can be great goals to set for ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with those goals. But when it comes from a place of love, I think it takes on a different energy. It creates a little bit more fun and a little bit more ease around sort of sticking to those things.
So, Leah, I'm curious, kind of and I know we haven't gotten in too much yet, and we'll get there after the break to, what work-life balance is through psychology and astrology, but I think it's something that's familiar to everybody. The things that I've been hearing from you about Virgo season are it's basically go, 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 go. And, with Leo season, there was a lot of go, but there was also time for, I think, just naps, right? Like just taking a second and resting. What types of things should we be doing in Virgo season to relax? Is there opportunity for that?
Definitely. Definitely. Leo season did have an element of that go, exactly like you said, and an element of, okay, now it's time to seriously take a nap. And in Leo season, we saw the fire energy that spirit took on of when you were inspired and doing it. And when you were tired, all you could do was rest. Virgo season says, okay, how can we put that into a structure? How can I schedule this time for I'm being creative from this hour to this hour? That is my creative time that I've set for myself. And then in the evening, I've decided I've stopped working at 6 or at 7. And after that, that is blocked out free time. And I don't have to necessarily say this is exactly what I'm doing with that time. Maybe I'm resting. Maybe I'm taking a nap. Maybe I am, watching Netflix, whatever it might be. So just practicing getting in the routine of what would it look like to put that energy of creating and resting into a schedule.
So using the structure of Virgo season to kind of benefit you from the rest and relaxation perspective as well.
Yes, which is why I'm so excited that we're talking about work-life balance today, because Virgo season says, okay, how can we pay attention to that work-life balance and practice moving the blocks of time that we have in each day around to create the perfect balance for ourselves.
Work-life balance as a topic evokes a lot of obviously ideas about work. And I think it's really interesting. And when we get into the academic approach, we'll hear how our approach to work-life balance changes as we age. But we won't really talk about the way we thought about work when we were children. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
It's funny because we were talking about this, came up in conversation when we were talking the other day, and I found this picture on Facebook, like one of those time hop pictures where it's like, this is something you posted years ago, that a teacher of mine, I think in 5th grade, had posted of me, and it, said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had written marine biologist, which is so funny because I don't even remember that. But I do remember being fascinated by the ocean and dolphins and like wanting to be able to like see marine life. And maybe that came from growing up in the mountains, but so funny to find that. And then I remember wanting to be a doctor and then just being like, oh my gosh, it's going to take so much math and science and I'm going to be in school so long. I don't think I can do it. And that sort of faded, which was funny. But I in my heart, I was like, I want to do that. I just don't know if I can get the grades I need to be able to do it. Just so interesting that was going on in my kid brain. What did you want to be?
Nothing is promising or realistic or prestigious as the things that you mentioned. The story that my parents will always tell you is when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a window. And it doesn't make any sense. I don't honestly know why, but I was also a kid that wanted to change my name to Godzilla. So I don't know, maybe it made sense in that context. Um, but then I think as I got older and realized that I couldn't go through life with my name being Godzilla and telling people I wanted to be a window, I took some aptitude and placement tests in high school, which I think are probably pretty common. I think everybody has to do it. And one of my top results came up as being a parking lot, which I think they meant a parking lot attendant, but I'm honestly not sure. Um, and that was obviously a big blow to my big fish in a little pond that we mentioned last time, that ego. And then I played around. I kind of went three different directions. I took some engineering courses and decided I wanted to be an engineer, which would have been, I think, really fun because I think very differently than like a traditional engineer. I don't think as, you mentioned STEM, like math and science. I don't think in that way. So it would have been really fun. And I also played around with being a counselor and industrial organizational psych. And it's one of the reasons I'm really excited for this episode is because I get to put that industrial organizational psychology hat on and approach things from that direction.
Don't you think a parking lot is such a step up from like a window though in terms of your inanimate object like career trajectory?
I look at it two different ways, right? Because a window, that's basically an office job. Whereas a parking lot, like nothing wrong with blue collar, but it's a blue collar job. You're out in the heat all day. So I don't know. Maybe window is where it's at. I don't know.
But parking lots make a lot of money. Can you imagine being a parking lot in LA? Like you would be hopping.
That is true. And really, I don't know that windows ever make anybody any money. So maybe you're right. I don't know.
Guess we'll find out someday.
On a more serious note, I think that we would be really interested in knowing maybe some of the things that you wanted to be when you were a kid, listeners. We will be posting a question on the Facebook page and would love to get some responses from you all. I know I personally look forward to reading through each and every comment.
Our featured business this week is Living Earthy, owned by my wonderful friend Kendall, who is an intuitive transformation coach, an energy healer, and an herbalist. Her mission is to help people reconnect with the earth and their soul to bring greater collective expansion. She provides immersive experiences that support spiritual or woo-curious women to get unstuck, step into confidence and clarity, and create momentum toward the impact they want to have in the world. Kendall also makes handmade herbal remedies and self-care products, as well as abalone jewelry for people to create a deeper everyday connection with themselves and the earth. You can head to our website for links to Kendall's site and shop. Use the code FULLCIRCLE for 20% off.
So when I was looking at Kendall's store, I spent most of the time on the shop. And I think the favorite thing that I saw is anxiety, which is an herbal tonic. And I think that is so incredibly creative. And I also feel like when I'm scrolling through the site, I can just smell the things she's got in her store page here.
I can tell you that the anxiety blend is one of the best ones that she makes. Everything in Kendall's shop is just that. It's so fragrant. And one of my favorite things is her facial steam. And I had never used one before I got one from Kendall, and it's incredible. The magic you feel when you get to use something like that, or the decadence of somebody who's taken the time to put together these beautiful herbs and flowers to create a magical blend.
Now comes my favorite part of the episode 1 of the 2-episode arc for each theme. I love digging into the nitty-gritty and, popping open those textbooks and really doing some research to fundamentally understand the topic that we want to talk about. And work-life balance is such an interesting space right now culturally. It's starting to become more and more important to employees and employers who are having to get creative about how they market themselves to attract talent. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that there are so many different names for it. Today, we've called it work-life balance, but you also see words like conflict and facilitation and work family and depletion and integration, all of these different words. And what I think that that is really showing us is that every single person experiences this balance differently. Even for me as a single person, what works for me right now is not going to work for me at 35, 45, 55, those years down the road. On a basic level, and we talked about this during the taste of the theme, we're talking about how you divide your time between work and your life. So spending time with your kids and going on a hike with friends and things like that. In terms of psychology, and I mentioned this earlier as well, we're going to delve into this one from an industrial organizational perspective, which is kind of the business side of psychology. And the first concept that I want to talk about is the idea of a psychological contract. There's two different types of psychological contract. There's transactional and there's relational. So transactional is the written employment contract, the idea that we're going to spend this amount of time at work, get paid this amount of money, and have these particular duties. It's pretty cut and dry. Things start to get a little bit more murky with the relational contracts, which are assumed, unspoken, informal sets of expectations between an employer and an employee. I think these relational contracts are the biggest perpetrator of this infringement that we're all experiencing on work-life balance. Even when we're home, we're tempted to check our email on our phone, and our boss might not tell us that they're expecting us to work late to finish up a project, but we absolutely feel guilty when we jump in the car or hop on the bus or the train to go home. A great example of this, and I love talking about it, is Google's 20% time. So a little while back, Google boasted about how all of their employees get to work on whatever project they want for 20% of their time. Obviously, with an innovative company like Google, these workers are able to produce amazing things with this 20% time. We've got Google Maps, Gmail, AdSense, which will appeal to all of the individuals that are running their own businesses online. All of these things came from that 20% time. On the surface, 20% time sounds awesome. It's very innovative. But the problem is that all of these employees are still expected to do their regular job. So the 20% time quickly became known as 120% time because you're putting in that extra time on top of your normal work week. So why does all of this matter? It's time to introduce the second psychological concept, which is cognitive dissonance. It's going to come up in this podcast all the time in future episodes. Quickly, cognitive dissonance is when our actions don't match up with our thoughts and our emotions. So we experience this cognitive dissonance in two ways when we mess up that work-life balance. On one hand, we might say that work is important to us and feel bad when we choose not to let it pull us away from our home life. And on the opposite side, the other hand, we may want to commit to our personal lives, but find work is pulling us away and we feel guilty for that time that we're now spending away from our family. The point is that we experience this when our mind wants one thing and we take actions towards something else. One of the interesting things is this cognitive dissonance, which is happening entirely within our own brains, can lead to harm to our mental and physical wellness. We feel fatigue, our immune system can be weakened, we experience other symptoms at an increased level, and we sacrifice those relationships that we hold near and dear. This dissonance is going to put your body under an internal stress. Your mind isn't mad, it's just disappointed. So how do we fix it? It may seem like the employer holds all the cards, so what option do we have other than to grin and bear it? The number one thing that you can do is set boundaries. What's unacceptable to you? Are you going to work long hours, but work stays at work and you're not going to take it home? Is the weekend that sacred time and you'll work Monday through Friday, but Saturday to Sunday, that's all your time? I know for me personally, I travel a lot for work, and one of the places that I have claimed as my own is time in the airport and time on the airplane. Instead of answering email, I'm listening to music, catching up on Netflix, and doing anything that I need to do to decompress from a long week. The point is, through all of this, that work-life balance is different for every single person, but it is extremely important for your mental and physical well-being that you find what works best for you.
This is awesome. This is awesome. There's two things that really hit me that I want to pull out of everything that you said that is just so juicy and important when it comes to work-life balance. And I think understanding it in this context is really important. The first is knowing what works for you in terms of work-life balance and how that may change over time. I love that you mentioned what works for you at 20 may not work for you at 30, may not work for you at 40. And the adjustment that we go through during the different periods when we are figuring out what our work-life balance looks like, and that it doesn't stay the same throughout our entire life.
Yeah, I think that fits in really nicely too with astrology, in that everybody's astrology is different. You can be born on the same day and your astrology is still going to be different. And I think it really humanizes the experience to understand that it's going to change, and what the person sitting next to you is experiencing is not going to be what you're experiencing.
Right. Even if you work at the same company as somebody else, your work-life balance is going to be different than theirs. And I think that's where we start to get into that comparing our work-life balance to others, deciding that ours isn't right, and then making adjustments and things like that that don't necessarily suit us. So even just within being in the same situation as somebody else, just knowing that your balance may look different than theirs and that that's okay. And I also love that you mentioned non-negotiable time of what is your boundary. It's just and it's okay to have things like that that are unacceptable to you of this time will not be stepped on. It's my time. No matter what comes up, right? Because I think the first time we allow something to sneak into that time, the defenses are sort of weakened and then more things start to leak into it. And before you know it, like that Saturday that you set to not include work emails is suddenly a work day again.
Yeah, it's the first crack in the dam before the dam blows and you're feeling flooded and like you're drowning again, right?
Yeah. So I wonder, my question for you is then how do you stay strong on those boundaries? How do you say, okay, this time on the plane, this time in the airport, this is my time and nothing touches this?
Yeah, I think that this is another instance where, your mileage may vary and you have to figure out what works for you, because obviously your job is important, right? As much as maybe we hate to admit it, we need money to live. And so this is a very delicate balance between you and your employer. I know for me, I'm very lucky. I have an employer that is open to the idea that, like, yes, you have a stressful job and it's okay for you to draw these boundaries. And one of the ways that I'm able to continue to draw those boundaries is by making sure that, the time that I haven't protected for myself, the time that I've allowed to be devoted to work, that I'm doing a good job and getting my work done. And I think that's one of the keys is making sure that as much as you demand respect for your boundaries, you're providing respect to the need of your employer during the time that you have committed to them. And maybe that commitment is only the full, you've got me 40 hours a week, and whatever you want me to do for that 40 hours, I'll do. And I know for me, and I'm sure for you as well, just kind of knowing your busy schedule, it bleeds over. It's a little bit more than the 40 hours, right? But I think that the idea is set those boundaries as early as you can in a conversation with whoever the decision maker is for you. If that's a manager, if it's a smaller business and it's the owner, or even if you run your own business and you need to have that negotiation with yourself, it's setting the boundaries early and then making sure that they're respected.
I love that you mentioned that. And I think it is so important to make sure that, and just something overarching for this episode, really, when we're talking about work-life balance, is when you're doing work, be there fully present, mindfully doing the work. And when you are engaging in the life side of things, be there fully present, engaging in the life part of it. Because when you experience the bleed over, exactly like you were saying, it starts to dissolve those boundaries, and then it's hard to know what's what.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get to kind of the direction that this work-life balance is moving, at least in the corporate world, is more to that work-life integration. So, hey, perfect. You worked 8 to 5, head on home, be with your family. But maybe when the kids go to bed at 9:30, jump on the computer for another hour or so and get some work done. I think there's been pushback to that, but that is kind of the direction I see it moving. And it's up to you, I think, on an individual basis to say, hey, this is my boundary and this is where I'm drawing the line.
Right. And I think it's become more important to our generation to find something that we love to do because we do realize how much time we do spend working. And so, in that instance, and like you're talking about, I find myself even sometimes hopping on the computer at night after things have sort of settled down to work on something because I'm excited to engage with it. And so also just knowing, I think why we see pushback to that is knowing why you're doing it. Are you hopping on because you love what you do? Are you hopping on because you feel obligated? And knowing where the feeling comes from so that you can understand the impact it's having on your life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We've mentioned astrology, at least in passing, during that kind of psychological breakdown of work-life balance. And I'm really interested to see through your lens. I'd be really interested to hear about it from the astrology side of things.
When you're looking at work-life balance through the astrology lens, what it comes down to is understanding fundamentally what you're working with. So understanding yourself first, and then applying this lens that we've talked about on top of that. So within your birth chart, you have what's called a masculine and feminine balance. And everyone has it. Whether you are male or female or don't identify, we all have masculine and feminine energy that inherently lives within us all. And the way that you find out what your balance is by looking at all of the zodiac elements in your chart, because they all are either masculine or feminine. And from that, taking the number of how many masculine signs you have and how many feminine signs you have, and understanding what your balance looks like. So the masculine-feminine balance plays into work-life balance because the masculine sort of represents the work context. The feminine mirrors the life part. So the feminine mirrors the life part, the masculine mirrors the work part. So you can see inherently what balance you are working with. So for instance, for today's episode, I looked at both of our charts, Matt, and I pulled what our balance naturally is. So you are working with 8 feminine signs within your chart and 6 masculine signs. And I'm working with 10 feminine signs and 4 masculine signs. So what that's going to mean is that for you, Matt, on the masculine-feminine balance spectrum naturally within your chart, you've got a little bit more feminine energy than masculine energy, but your balance is pretty even. That's going to be a pretty even balance. We can see with mine, it's a little bit more out of whack. So I have 4 masculine signs, 10 feminine signs, which means that I find it easier to think about ideas, to have lots of ideas, but I also don't always know which one to act on. I'm good at taking time to rest. I'm good at getting in tune with my body and what I need. Just inherently, just naturally. And some of those things to varying degrees, right? It's not like I'm just naturally going to be like super in touch with myself. Like it does take a little bit of work for me to get there depending on what works for me. But it's going to be more natural to me to be in that resting sort of being mode than it is in the work mode. For you, you've got a little bit of that going on, but you've also got more masculine energy at play, which means that you can probably switch between the two pretty easily. You're a little bit better at the just hanging out mode, but you also know what work mode feels like and you can slip into that a little bit easier. Yeah, so if you have more feminine energy, you're going to find it harder to take action. You love options, can't always decide. Maybe find it hard to stand up for yourself, put up those boundaries, and maybe dealing a little bit with self-doubt, which keeps you from taking action, right? Keeps you from dropping into that masculine energy side. And also finding yourself maybe a little bit unmotivated and just kind of chilling out, happy chilling out, calm, analyzing sort of energy. On the flip side, if you have more masculine energy, you're going to find it hard to relax and sit still and maybe feel lazy or guilty if you aren't constantly working through a to-do list or doing something productive. And because it's a going, doing, being energy, it wants to be productive and helpful and see efforts for the work that it's putting in. Looking at your masculine feminine balance can tell you a lot about where you are naturally and maybe where you're going to need to put in a little bit of work to achieve that balance. Just notice, okay, for me, noticing, okay, my masculine energy is quite a bit lower than my feminine energy, which means that when it comes down to work mode, I'm going to have to put in some mindfulness and some effort around that to really get myself there, to make sure that I'm dropping into that masculine work energy and kind of like we talked about, not bleeding that sort of energy in me that just naturally wants to relax all the time. So when you're looking at work-life balance from an astrological perspective, it really has to do with looking at the elements in the chart to understand the inherent energy with which you're working. And by better knowing what your natural balance is, you can orient that toward the balance that you'd like to see and understand where you are, understand where you'd like to be, and start to bridge that gap between the two.
Is it accurate to say that when we consider work-life balance, not bringing into any of the politics of what I'm about to say, but would masculine be more the work and feminine be more the life? Or is it more masculine and feminine balance is how you approach both life and work?
I think when we're breaking elements down, masculine is associated with the work and feminine is associated with the life. That is just naturally the way the elements break down. I think that's why the word balance is really important, because you have those two things, but it is finding the medium between the two.
So we're balancing our energies and also balancing the difference between work and life. So it's kind of a juggling act almost.
Sort of.
Using your birth chart to help you.
I think the energies mirror this concept, if that makes sense. So it's not juggling four different things. It's your masculine feminine balance is going to point to your work-life balance. And by getting your masculine and feminine balance in better check and care, the work-life balance naturally follows. It's sort of the seed of where it stems from.
That makes a lot of sense. So work-life balance is almost like a symptom of this feminine masculine energy balance.
Yes.
And if you correct one, then the rest of it will come soon after.
Yes. I mean, if you want to start with work-life balance, it's addressing, exactly like you said, a symptom. But if you want to get to the root cause, it's probably going to lie in your masculine and feminine balance.
So here's another question then, just because you and I have talked about birth charts before, we might have mentioned them already in the last couple of episodes here. I don't remember for sure, but we've talked about birth charts before and how it is determined based off of, date, time you were born, location, those kinds of things. How do you change the balances if they are predetermined, or is it just being aware of the balances that you can change your actions now?
It's being aware. So you can't change your inherent masculine and feminine balance. It is what is, projected on your chart, but you can change the way you relate to it. So I can't change the fact that I have more feminine energy. And I think like anything, and I always say this in reference to a lot of things in the birth chart, really, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Because having a lot of feminine energy, I know how to chill. Like, I know how to chill. I know how to plan a chill sesh. I know how to hang out. That's something that comes inherently to me. And for somebody who doesn't, that could be a really awesome thing to spend time with me during a chill sesh. They're like, oh, you really know how to just like take time off and make sure I'm not working and on my phone and I had a really engaging present day. But on the flip side, then when I'm trying to get into work mode, we start to see that like, and I'm going to use air quotes around curse because nothing is truly, a curse, but for phrase sake, where I have a harder time getting into work mode, staying focused, putting in that time, feeling really in the work flow zone. So it is being aware of it and understanding what your gift is and understanding what your challenge is.
As we have done with past episodes, we think it's really important to end each of our sessions together with a psychological wellness tip and a tarot card to guide you for the next week until we meet again. Today's psychological wellness tip is following with the previous 2 episodes. We're using another of Carol Rive's 6 pillars of psychological well-being, and this week's pillar is environmental mastery. Really, what environmental mastery is all about is taking control of your life and the things that surround you. You should organize your day in a way that maximizes efficiency, do the things that have to get done so that you have time to relax and enjoy the things that you want to do. Take control of your situation.
That fits in so perfectly with our theme today and with the tarot pull today, which is the 7 of Swords. And the 7 of Swords talks about deception and secrets. And there's something maybe that we're hiding either from ourselves or from another person, or potentially something that they're hiding from us that needs to be pulled out, shown some light upon, and changed, make a different decision around it. We've been seeing ourselves test the boundaries and what we can get away with and what we can kind of keep in the dark. It's time to expose it to the light, figure out what's not working, and like Matt said, take control of your situation. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast. If you want to learn more about us or hear previous episodes, you can visit lealily.com/fullcirclepodcast. There you can find previous episodes and also our show notes where we include previous tarot pulls, links, and more extras from each of our episodes. You can also engage with us on Twitter at fullcircle_pod. And we also have a community on Facebook under Full Circle, the Magic Mindset Podcast, where we hope to communicate and talk with you. You can share your insights, your thoughts on our themes, and more in that community. If you want to listen to more of our episodes, we are on Spotify and iTunes, and also on my website. We release new episodes every Monday. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.